Chapter 15. It's not how hard you get hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. 1992 was starting out awful. I had lost my home, lost all of my possessions, and now I had lost my band. It would have been very easy to give up and just feel sorry for myself, but that wasn't in my nature. The harder things got, the more I knew what I had to do. I wasn't sad. I was angry. I was angry that my father lost another home for us. I was angry that I lost everything I had ever owned. And now I was angry that the guys in my band had let me down. This was when I realized that everyone did not have the drive, passion, and determination that I had. I feel that, in a way, every other member of Playground basically gave up on their dreams that day. I think it was easier for them to say to themselves, Playground would have been huge if we just stayed together. Maybe they were afraid of failing after Playground. Maybe they just didn't want to play music anymore. Maybe this wasn't their dreams after all. And if it wasn't their dreams anymore, I totally respect that. I just knew that I had to get right back up, dust myself off, and start all over again. And that's exactly what I did. A few days after Playground ended, I started answering ads in all of the local music papers. I answered 2 ads that looked promising. The first one read, Commercial hard rock band with full-length CD and management looking for drummer. This was extremely exciting. CDs were very new at this time, and for someone to have a full-length CD meant they were pretty big. Plus, the ad said they had management. Of course, this could mean anything, but back then, these were some key words you'd look for when trying to find a new band and weed out all the crappy local bands. I left a message for the contact number. His name was Scott Rage. The second ad I answered was for a band out of Wayne, New Jersey called Sinister Charm. We spoke briefly and immediately set up an audition. I had to take a New Jersey transit bus to go meet them at their studio in Wayne, New Jersey. Once again, innocence is amazing. I was about to take 2 buses and a train all the way to New Jersey to meet with a band I had never even heard a song from yet. The trip probably took me about 3 hours. I was willing to do anything to find a new band, and nothing was going to stop me from making my dreams come true. I never even gave it a second thought to go all the way there to meet people. Once I arrived, I met with singer Tony Martino and guitarist Scott Delfino. 2 Italians. I liked them already. Sinister Charm was rehearsing in a giant old warehouse. It was actually a really cool setup. They had a cheap set of drums already set up for me to audition on. They didn't have a demo or anything, but they began showing me some of their original material, and I absolutely loved some of the songs. One song in particular I thought could be a huge hit. It was called I Think I Love You. Here's me playing that song with Sinister Charm at our very first rehearsal.
Could it be? I just don't know. Do you know?
We instantly took to each other. Before you knew it, they were not only asking me to join the band, but they wanted me to stay over for the night to hang out and write some more music. I accepted. Just like that, I had found my new band. Sinister Charm was made up of Tony Martino on vocals, Scott Delfino on guitars, Joey Cassata on drums, and I think the bass player's name was John, but I really don't remember. After a long rehearsal of catching me up on all of their original material, we went back to Tony's house. That is when I really knew I made the right decision in joining this band. Tony and Scott began playing me all of their acoustic and piano songs they had written. They were incredible. This was a time when the power ballad was huge. I thought that every one of their songs could have been a giant hit on MTV. I arrived back home and I told my mom that I think I found my new band. I played her a tape of our rehearsal and she loved it. She was so happy for me and always gave me her 100% support. She then said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. You have a message on the answering machine about an ad you answered." It was Scott Rage calling me back from the ad I answered a few days prior. Even though I was happy with Sinister Charm, I wasn't going to let another opportunity slip by. I called Scott back and we talked for about 30 minutes. He was friendly, yet very businesslike, which I liked. I needed to be involved with people that had the same drive and passion that I did. Scott told me that they would mail me a CD and a press kit of their band, Exposed, so I could learn the songs for an audition the following week. In the meantime, I had set up moving my drums that were still in Brendan's basement to the Sinister Charm warehouse. The most difficult part about living in Manhattan was being away from my drums. Up until I moved to Manhattan, I had played my drums every single day from the age of 13 to 17. Every day. Never failed. How was I going to learn a full CD of material without having my drums to practice on? I quickly remembered my old trick from before I was able to buy my Tama drum set. Air drumming with my sticks was actually an amazing way to practice. It worked on muscle memory and helped with stick control. I received the Exposed CD a few days later and was extremely impressed. The quality and packaging was absolutely amazing. The artwork and the band photos looked perfect. The production sound was better than 90% of the CDs I owned at the time. And most importantly for me, the drum sound was exactly the sound I wanted back then. This was obviously a very professional band with great management and money behind them. The one drawback was the songs were definitely not as catchy as the Sinister Charm songs. Either way, I had to at least audition for this amazing band to see what would happen. I could always make a decision about Sinister Charm after. The Exposed songs were pretty challenging to learn, and the drum parts were very intricate. I would learn them as best as I could by air drumming and memorizing, but I knew I needed to play them at least once before I went to the audition. I rented a small studio in Manhattan for 2 hours to practice, and luckily, the air drumming paid off. I seamlessly played the songs on the drum kit with only a few minor hiccups that I quickly corrected. The audition was held at the Exposed studio in the Queens Music Building. I had never been there before, but over the years I had heard many big bands that had rehearsed in that building. I would later learn that Exposed's room was Metallica's old room when they rehearsed in the same space. Anthrax also rehearsed right next door. When I arrived, it was not what I was expecting. It was a very run-down old building with a weird smell. I went to the top floor and knocked on a big black door with an Exposed sticker on it. The guitarist Scott Rage greeted me. He then introduced me to the other band members, singer Johnny Blade and bassist Martin Pelosi. Also in attendance was their manager, Nico Andusic. After exchanging a few pleasantries, I climbed up onto the massive drum riser that was set up in their rehearsal room. It still had their old drummer's kit up there. We plowed through the first 3 songs from their CD, Rolling Thunder, Getting Higher, and The Countdown to Midnight. Not to toot my own horn, but we sounded incredible together. This was easily the most talented and seasoned group of players I'd played with to date. Scott was an amazing Yngwie Malmsteen-type virtuoso guitar player, but still could play that sloppy Ace Frehley blues style when needed. Marty was an excellent bass player with a lot of feel and groove. He could also complement some of Scott's technical runs in a similar way that the band Mr. Big was doing at the time with bassist Billy Sheehan and guitarist Paul Gilbert. Johnny Blade was a high-powered, high-range type vocalist with a sound that was popular at the time. He immediately reminded me of Jeff Tate from Queensryche. They were exactly what I was looking for. After we jammed, I could tell that they were happy with the way I played, and they asked me if I sang at all. Up until this point, I had never really sung backup or lead, but I loved singing along to all my favorite songs at home. John gave me a few lines to sing and try a harmony on, and I think I did pretty well. Next, we chatted for a bit so they could get to know me. When I told them that I was 18 years old, they couldn't believe it because I still looked much older than I really was. They then told me that they were all about 28 years old. Now, I was the one that couldn't believe it. I could tell they were older than I was, but I never thought by 10 years. If they were okay with me being 10 years younger, then I was okay with them being 10 years older. They thanked me for coming down and said they would be in touch. When I walked out of their rehearsal room, 5 other drummers were waiting to go in. It turned out they auditioned over 30 guys. I left there thinking it was a long shot at best. I'd enjoyed playing with them, but I didn't get my hopes up. Besides, I was actually very excited about my new band, Sinister Charm. I just recently brought my drums to their studio out in New Jersey, and the original songs they had were way better than the ones on the Exposed CD. Still, Exposed was just much further along in their career. I would have to wait to see if they even got back to me before I gave it any more thought. Another week went by and I still hadn't heard anything from Exposed. I assumed I didn't get the gig and was totally okay with it because Sinister Charm was really starting to heat up. Like I said, Sinister Charm were writing one hit song after another. If we could get a really great demo together, it would blow away what Exposed was doing. It was now approaching summer of 1992. I wasn't going to graduate from my music high school with everyone else because I had started a year late. It was going to take me at least until January of the following year to graduate, which really didn't matter to me. I didn't have any close friends at the school with whom I wanted to graduate anyway. It just sucked that I had to go for another half a year. I wanted to be done with school in the worst way. One day after returning from school, I had a message on my answering machine from Scott Rage. He said to call him as soon as I could. I was actually a little hesitant to call him back. What did he want? I was very happy with the way Sinister Charm was progressing, and I wasn't sure what I would do if Exposed offered me the gig. Yes, Exposed was better right now, but I thought Sinister Charm had more potential. I called him anyway to see what he wanted. Scott picked up and he said, "Hey dude," he called everyone dude. "Sorry it took so long to get back to you. We auditioned a lot of guys but feel like you are the best fit. We would love you to come down to the studio this weekend to jam again and talk over details." I said, "Sure, I'll be there, thanks," then hung up the phone. I now had a big decision to make. Do I join the already established band Exposed with a manager and a CD, or do I take a chance on a relatively new project, Sinister Charm, which had the potential to be something special? After a few hours of thinking long and hard, I made the decision to stay with Sinister Charm because the songs were so special. I had rehearsal with them that night, and I would call to let Scott know in the morning. As fate would have it, when I arrived at Sinister Charm rehearsal that night, our guitarist Scott Delfino wasn't there. Tony informed me that Scott had just quit the band. I couldn't believe it. Things had been going so great. I asked, what the hell happened? Tony had responded that they had gotten into a bad argument over something stupid. He said, "Honestly, I don't know. Call and ask him." And that's exactly what I did as soon as I got home. Scott went on to explain to me that Tony was some kind of pathological liar and he couldn't be trusted. I didn't understand what he was talking about and asked for more details. Scott said, "Tony told me that he was in a car accident a year ago and that's why he wore hair extensions." First of all, I didn't even know Tony wore hair extensions, nor did I care. Scott continued and said, The story he said was a complete lie. He just couldn't grow his hair long, so he wore hair extensions. Can you believe it, Joey? I said, hold on a second. Are you telling me that this great band is breaking up because you found out our singer and your writing partner lied about why he wears hair extensions? Scott confirmed. I can't play in a band with a guy that lies like that. Oh my God. I hung up the phone and was in absolute shock. It was like dealing with mental patients. I could see why so many bands break up. It was because they were all nuts. These two morons were going to throw away an amazing band because of hair extensions. This was even more ridiculous and petty than why Playground broke up. At least it made my next decision very easy. I went down a few days later, sometime in the late summer of 1992, to meet with the guys from Exposed, where they officially offered for me to become a member. I gladly accepted. Once I joined Exposed, I knew I had reached the next level in my music career. Not only were these all incredible players, but they were much more professional and business-oriented. The first thing they had me do was sign a management contract with their manager, Nico. Nico was a sweetheart and had been around the music industry for a very long time. He always credited himself with discovering the multi-platinum rock group, the Scorpions. Me, still being only 18 years old, had no idea what I was signing, but gladly signed anyway. I quickly learned that Exposed was about one thing and one thing only: getting a record deal. They knew that's all that really mattered. Yes, playing live shows was important to make a band tight, but that's not what got you to where you needed to be anymore. It wasn't 1982 when it was possible to build the following, have the record companies hear about the buzz, then send someone from their A&R department to come and look at you. It was almost 1993, and the club scene was dead. The only way record labels could hear about your band was to submit a demo or album to the labels. Nico had a few big connections at Atlantic Records. One was with co-founder Ahmet Ertegun, and that had something to do with their shared Turkish heritage. Ertegun had been described as one of the most significant figures in the modern recording industry, and even though at this time Ertegun wasn't really personally signing bands, Nico knew that Ertegun would pass along any recordings that Nico submitted to the head of his A&R department, Jason Flom. Flom was already credited with signing rock acts such as Twisted Sister, Saigon Kick, Skid Row, and White Lion. Flom was a major player in the music industry at this point and was always looking for the next big thing. We knew Exposed could be just that. In the exact opposite way of thinking than my previous bands, Exposed immediately wanted to record a brand new, full-length album so they could get it in the hands of Flom at Atlantic Records. The guys in Exposed were always so professional about everything. They even insisted that everyone in the band have top-of-the-line gear to play on. It was all part of the mystique that they wanted to project. In their minds, if they had the biggest and best of everything, then the perception would be that Exposed must be a huge band. Look at all their amazing gear. Look at their amazing rehearsal studio. Look at their amazing sounding full-length CD. I totally agreed with this philosophy. Perception is absolutely reality. Because of this way of thinking, they asked me to upgrade my drum set. Even though I had just recently bought a new Gibraltar rack system, I agreed it was time for an upgrade. After all, I was still using my bass drum from my old Shock set that I got when I was 9 years old. There was just one big problem. Being in this new, amazingly professional band was getting very expensive. It was now April of 1993, and I had just recently graduated from my music high school. There was no ceremony or anything. Because I graduated mid-year with just a few other students, I was basically handed a piece of paper and sent on my way. Music school was never what I'd hoped it would be. It was just another school trying to tell me what to learn and how to learn it, and I was glad to be finished. I thought briefly about going to college, but I decided at the very least I wanted to wait until September so I could take some time off to focus more on Exposed. Hopefully, We would be huge rock stars by then, and I wouldn't have to go to college. Like I mentioned, being in Exposed was getting very expensive. Even though we had a manager, he didn't really pay for anything. He had one responsibility: to get us a record deal. Band members were responsible for paying for studio rent and recording the new CD. And now the band wanted me to buy a new drum set. I knew I had to find a job immediately. For years, my brother had been working in a hospital located in the West Village of Manhattan. One of our relatives worked there and had originally gotten Danny the job. Because he was now a valued employee, he made a recommendation for me to get a part-time position in the same department. Shortly after the recommendation, I got the job. My hours were 3:45 to 8 p.m., which was absolutely perfect. I got out at 8 and went straight to the Exposed rehearsal studio every night. I would now have enough money to support all things I needed to do with my new band. After I got my job, I quickly signed up for a brand new credit card, my very first, and went with Exposed guitarist Scott Rage to Sam Ash Music to buy my new drum set. Scott told me that he had a hookup at Sam Ash and that he could get me a really good deal on a new drum set. I didn't know exactly what he meant by hookup, but if it meant getting me a good deal on a new set, I was in. After doing some research, I picked out the drum kit that I wanted. I decided that I wanted to stick with Tama because that's what I had been playing on for the last 5 years. I had always wanted to buy a Ludwig kit because my hero Eric Carr was playing them, but they were very expensive at the time and also not as popular in the rock world anymore. Most stores like Sam Ash didn't even have them on display, so I wouldn't know how to get a set of Ludwigs even if I wanted. I also decided on Tama because I really loved the sound of Queensryche drummer Scott Rockenfield's drums on their newest album, Empire. I found out Rockenfield was using Tama's new flagship set, the Artstar 2, and that's exactly what I wanted. When Scott and I arrived at Sam Ash, we were quickly greeted by Scott's friend Marco Ciccoli, who was the head of the drum department. I told him what I was looking for, and he replied, "I have a set of Artstars in stock." He pulled out a blue, almost purplish floor tom for me to see, and I immediately fell in love with it. The color was officially called Jewel Blue. It was gorgeous. He then grabbed the Tama catalog for me to pick out sizes and configure my setup. Because of the research I had done, I knew exactly what setup I wanted. The same exact thing that Rockenfield was using in the new Queensryche video, Silent Lucidity. Marco knew right away what I was configuring. This was so freaking exciting to me. Even to this day, getting a new drum set is always such an adrenaline rush. After picking out the sizes, Marco asked me what I wanted to do about hardware, which I hadn't really even given much thought about. I told him that I had just bought a new Gibraltar rack about a year ago, and I would probably just use that. He said, "No way. I think I got just the thing." He went into the back room and came out with 2 6-foot poles. I had no idea what they were for, but I was excited. He began explaining that with these poles, a drummer could build a full cage around the set. He said, "It will look sick." Kind of a cross between Scott Rockenfield and Blas Elias from Slaughter. I couldn't picture exactly what he was talking about, but I knew what those drummers' kits looked like, and if I could have that, then I was on board. The only problem was that I had a feeling this was way too expensive. I had a $5,000 limit on my new credit card, and that's all I could spend. The drums alone were going to be about $4,800. This spectacular cage that Marco was constructing in his mind was probably another $2,500. Plus, I needed a few new cymbals. I explained to Marco my dilemma, and he told me to pick out the cymbals I wanted, and we could figure something out. I picked out a brand new set of Zildjian Custom Zs that totaled about $1,300. So the cymbals in combination with the drums and the new gigantic rack meant that I was looking at close to $10,000. I wanted to get a new kit and have top-of-the-line gear like the rest of the guys in Exposed, but $10,000 was nuts. There was no way I could afford it. Marco did some calculations and told me that he could get all the drums and cymbals for the $5,000 credit that I had. I was super happy, and that was an amazing deal. But without the cage, I couldn't set anything up. I said, "Great, but there's no way I was going to be able to afford the cage too." He said, "Joey, paisan, don't worry about it. I'm going to throw the whole cage in on the arm." The term "on the arm" was the Italian way of saying for free. What? I couldn't believe it. I guess Scott really did have a hookup. Marco and I got back in touch years later, and he would become my artist rep at Vic Firth Sticks and then later at Evans Drumheads. He was the one originally responsible for giving me my very first full endorsement. Paisans for life. I placed the order for the drums, and we left that day with the full cage and cymbals. I still thought it was too good to be true. I just paid $5,000 for $10,000 worth of gear? It wasn't until my drums arrived a few weeks later that I fully believed it. Scott came with me to pick them up, and we went straight to the exposed rehearsal room to set up my massive new set and cage. My new Tama Art Stars were incredible. I felt like I was piloting a massive spacecraft when I sat inside the 6-foot-high steel cage. It was my dream set. Even though it wasn't anything like the drum set that I saw Peter Criss play on at Madison Square Garden when I was 5 years old, when I sat behind this new setup, I remember feeling the same way I felt that fateful night at MSG when I first saw Peter's drums rise to the ceiling. My dreams were slowly becoming a reality. Exposed played a few shows while getting ready to record our full-length album. I found out quickly that although the new cage drum set was amazing, it was not very practical when transporting to gigs. One of the first shows I played with Exposed was in New York City at a place called Acme Underground. It was in the basement of a building on Bleecker Street, and when I tried to set up the cage on the drum platform, there wasn't enough height to accommodate the 6-foot poles. This was back when I still thought I needed a giant drum set to perform on, and it related to the Exposed mentality of having all the best gear and showing the audience that we were big time. My drum set turned out to look ridiculous in most places we were playing. Basically, no place in Manhattan could accommodate such a giant kit. I quickly reverted to a scaled-down version when we played Manhattan. Around March of 1994, we began tracking the new 10-song Exposed album. Tracking took place at Purple Light Studios on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. This was, of course, long before computers and Pro Tools recording software. We recorded on 2-inch tape on a 24-track board. This was to be my first real session in a big recording studio. I had done stuff with Playground and in school, but I'd never attempted to record a full-length album before. Knowing that this was going to be the same process that all of my heroes went through to record their albums meant I was excited and ready for the challenge. All of my drum tracking went smoothly. Scott's guitar work on the album was fantastic, but he overlaid so many different guitar tracks that the overall mix of the drums suffered a little bit. After several weeks of tracking, mixing, and mastering, the new Exposed album was completed. Now, our manager Nico had to do his thing, get us a record deal.
Where
Even though the recording was a little muddy and not up to par with the first Exposed CD, I thought the songs were way better on this new one, especially the acoustic guitar-driven Next Stop.
Last train, a cold one in my hand, and a smile on my face that only I can understand. 'Cause I'm coming back to you today. I'm leaving on this train and now I'm on my way. Leaving all I changed behind. Thought I could see, but I was blind. You were right and I was wrong. I'm headed back where I belong. The next stop is back to you. It's back to you. I said the next stop is back to you. All right. My love, I didn't mean to stray. I've counted all the days since we went our separate ways. Try to understand. I've only been half a man without you. Now I'm coming home to you. I'll never leave again. Leaving all I changed behind. Thought I could see, but I was blind. You were right and I was wrong. I'm heading back where I belong. The next stop is back to you. It's back to you. I said the next stop is back to you. Oh, one more time. I said the next stop is back to you. It's back to you. I said the next stop is back to you. Yeah. I'm coming home.
I thought this could absolutely be a hit. We were positive Nico was going to be able to land us a record deal with this new album. We scheduled a record release/listening party and invited many industry bigwigs. Nico even arranged for a limo to drive us to and from the party. On the night of our record release, we really felt like rock stars, or at least what I thought it would feel like to be a rock star back when I was 20. We figured after that party it was only a matter of time before the record labels were fighting over us. But we waited and waited and never heard from any of them. We knew, though, that Nico saved his big guns for last. He called his friend Amit Erdogan and set up a meeting with the head of A&R at Atlantic Records, Jason Flom. I remember the day of Nico's meeting like it was yesterday. This was, after all, the meeting I'd been waiting for all of my life. My dreams and aspirations were all in the hands of Jason Flom. He had the power to make all of it come true. If he liked the band, we were set. We would have a record deal and be on tour with the other bands from Atlantic by the end of the year. I remember being in work at the hospital and not being able to concentrate on anything. If Jason liked it, I would be quitting the next day. I'm not the type that gets nervous, But when something is out of my control, then I do get nervous. And this meeting was totally out of my control. Scott and I were on the phone about 20 times that day. I would call him from a payphone every 30 minutes to ask if he'd heard from Nico. Later that night, Scott called and said he'd finally heard from Nico. Nico said the meeting went great. Flom listened to a few songs in the office and seemed to really like it. He said that he would get back to Nico in a few days. I frantically responded, "A few days? How the hell could I make it a few days when just waiting a few hours seemed like an eternity?" But wait was exactly what I had to do. The next few days were pure agony, but at the same time I was getting uncontrollably excited. The thought of the head of Atlantic Records sitting and listening to our new album was incredible. I would daydream all day about hearing those songs on the radio. I just knew that Flom was going to like it, and I knew he was going to sign us. A few days later, Nico called a meeting at our studio. I thought, surely this is to tell us the good news. Once I arrived at the studio and saw Nico's face, I knew the news wasn't what I'd hoped. Nico went on to explain that Flom loved the album and the band, but he felt that we sounded a bit too dated. Unfortunately, this was a term I would hear a lot over the next few years. Exposed sound was still what we considered to be commercial hard rock. Some people today would consider us a hair band, but one of the more muso-type bands like Queensryche, not bubblegum bands like Poison. Flom explained to Nico that the music scene was beginning to change, and bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Alice in Chains were beginning to dominate the scene. Nobody wanted to hear operatic-type voices anymore, which is exactly what our singer John had. Everyone wanted to sign grunge bands, which were the exact opposite of what we were, and the exact opposite of what I liked. Grunge was dark, depressing music. I liked happy, feel-good music with a positive message. We were crushed and devastated by the news. It was the worst thing we could possibly hear. Not only did he not want to sign us, but he basically told us that our whole genre of music was dead. After this horrible news, I decided I would try my hand at college. I had no intention of giving up on my music, and I think the main reason I went to college was for my mom. Even though she was always the most supportive person of my music career, I thought it was time that I did something that would make her proud. I didn't want to go to music college because my high school burnt me out on that. So I decided to go where my brother went. Of course, it hadn't worked too well for me when I attempted to follow in Danny's footsteps back in high school, so I'm not sure why I thought it would be different going to college. Once I started college, my schedule was absolutely insane. I would leave my apartment in Manhattan at around 7 a.m. to get to my first class at 8:30. I would be in class till 1:30 p.m., then go straight to my job at the hospital. Once my shift ended at 8, I took a train directly to Queens to rehearse with Exposed until around 1 a.m. This was my schedule at least 4 days a week, and needless to say, after one semester of this brutal schedule, something had to change. I weighed all of my options and came to a pretty easy decision. Obviously, there was no way I was giving up on my music, and I knew I needed money to live on, so I couldn't give up my job. The only logical thing to quit was school. Ever since those early days with that devil Sister Marie, school just wasn't for me. I was just always someone that loved to figure out a better way to do things. And 9 times out of 10, I could. I was also someone that didn't like to be told what to do. And that's really all school ever was to me. Someone telling me what to do and how to do it. At a very young age, I felt like that controlled way of thinking was actually stifling someone's potential to grow as an individual. I don't want someone to tell me how I should think. Right or wrong, I want to think for myself. Don't get me wrong. I believe school is one of the most important things for a young mind to grow. Socially, it is essential. It also teaches you to function in a controlled atmosphere and shows you the rights and wrongs of interacting in that environment. There was just something about my particular teachers that made me rebel a little. About this time, my grandmother grew very ill and passed away. She had been sick for as long as I could remember. When I was just a baby, she had a massive heart attack and was never completely healthy again. For years, my family and I were in and out of the hospital with her. Once my grandmother passed, my mother was never the same. I always felt a little piece of my mom died the day my grandmother passed away. My brother had a new girlfriend, Liz, that he moved in with shortly after my grandmother's passing, and I had my music that kept me extremely busy. With all of our struggles as a family, my mom at least always had my grandmother to lean on and talk to. Now that she was gone, I think my mom felt very lonely. Over the next few years, Exposed recorded a few more times and gigged periodically. When Flom told us that our genre of music was dead, we kind of brushed grunge off as a fad that would quickly fade. It did turn out to be a fad, but it lasted about 7 years. Eventually, the whole entire live rock music scene was dead and buried. Even though grunge was popular, it was a different kind of music. Nobody was going to see local grunge bands play live. And in essence, that was shutting down any and all live rock music clubs. Looking back, I think it was a combination of all the club promoters implementing the pay-to-play strategy and grunge music that finally put the nail in the coffin on live music. Exposed tried to reinvent themselves a few times over those years, but to no avail. First, we attempted to become more of what we considered to be an industrial band. Maybe in the vein of like 9 Inch Nails and White Zombie. We even changed our name to In the Flesh.
Visions in my eyes, or should I show you what's really inside? Another status through my brain, another beat from my pain, somebody knowing in my soul, somebody tearing at the door. What if I like the pain? Maybe I'll link the chain. What if I let it through? All my fears control. What if I? What if I? What if I? What if I don't even know? Do you think I'm living in my dream? Do you think I'm making all this up? Did I hear you say I'm crazy and insane? So let me show you some of my pain. My other's laughing in my mind. My other wants to know you too. My head screaming in my head. I can't control it anymore. What if I like the pain?
Still, we couldn't bring ourselves to become a grunge band, and we thought that changing to a weird industrial-type sound might make us more relevant. This was an ongoing problem during the 90s for my music career. We were always chasing trends. Looking back, In the Flesh actually had an original sound with really new and fresh-sounding material. The major problem we still faced was that our singer John still sang in the high register that everyone associated with hair bands. As much as we changed our sound of music and our songwriting, it didn't matter. The first thing that every record company heard was John's voice. It was always the same comment. Band was cool, songs are cool, but the singer is too outdated. John couldn't take hearing that his voice was always the cause of the band not making it, and he eventually quit. Around late 1995-96, we contemplated calling it quits, but we decided we would give it one more shot. We also decided that we weren't going to chase any more trends. We would write and play music that we all loved. The first thing to do was to find a bluesy singer with a soulful voice. Basically, someone with the exact opposite sound as John's. After auditioning and meeting many bad singers, we finally found our man. His name was Paul Conady. Paul had an amazing voice, soulful, bluesy, and powerful. The only thing holding Paul back was his charisma. He didn't have that it factor that a rock and roll singer needed to command the stage and the audience. We knew this when he auditioned, but we hoped that we could teach him that swagger that he was lacking. We all agreed that once Paul joined the band, we needed to completely reinvent ourselves, starting with our name. After much debate and a lot of arguments, we settled on the name Dogfish. There was no real reason, only that Scott had found this cool picture of a dogfish that we thought could work for our new album cover. So in the winter of 1996, Dogfish was officially formed. We began writing new music with Paul for our new EP. We consciously decided to be more of a hard rock, no-frills band, and we made a promise to ourselves that we wouldn't chase any trends. We would just write music that we loved to play and hear. As Dogfish, we recorded 2 dynamite EPs, both with solid playing, great songwriting, and most importantly, soulful singing. We included one of the most unique and catchy songs that I had ever recorded, Water Dance. We also did a kick-ass cover of Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit. Nico once again tried to get us a record deal with all of the industry connections he had, but it was to no avail. The music scene was still dead for any rock bands not doing grunge. Dogfish lasted 2 solid years, and then we collectively decided to call it quits. The time I spent in Exposed, In the Flesh, and Dogfish really taught me a lot about the music industry and helped me become a much better musician. My only regret is that we never had any real major milestone or accomplishment that I could look back on and smile.